Hey y'all, No here. All right, so we're ready for lesson number 1. And, in the past, I have not scripted my videos very much, if at all. But in these Sunday school lessons, the lessons are going to be very scripted because I have to make sure that what I cover on video is precisely the same as what I cover in class. So if it looks like I'm reading to you, it's going to be pretty much because I am reading to you. So the first question we want to answer is, what is the Bible? And the short answer to that question is that the Bible is a book of books. It's a collection of writings that the church believes to be inspired by God. It's divided into 2 parts: the Old Testament, which was written before the birth of Christ, and the New Testament, which was written after. So why do we believe that the Bible is inspired by God? Well, there are 2 separate answers for the 2 parts of the Bible. We believe the Old Testament was inspired by God because the Son of God, Jesus, endorsed it while he was on earth. Jesus often quoted passages and taught using what we call the Old Testament. And he also taught his disciples what was not part of the Old Testament. That was all the made-up rules and regulations of the Pharisees and others. He taught against those writings. So I think it's safe for us to believe that the 39 books which Jesus taught from were inspired by God, since he is God. But if you're still not convinced, there's another very convincing reason. The writings in the Old Testament accurately predicted the future. There are at least 200 predictions in the Old Testament that came true. Now, some people might say that was just a coincidence, or that people who read the predictions made sure that they came true. Or maybe the people who wrote about the predictions coming true just lied about it. But there's one set of predictions that cannot be explained, and that is the exile of people in Judah who were taken away to Babylon. In Daniel chapter 1, verses 4 through 6, Daniel states that he was taken captive to Babylon in the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign, which was in 606 BC. Now, that's not just something that Daniel made up. It's a historical fact that's indisputable. A year later, the prophet Jeremiah predicted that the people taken captive would be released after 70 years. And they were released in 536 BC. It's a historical fact. So, if you take 606 and subtract 536 from it, what do you get? You get 70. And so Jeremiah's prediction was accurate and it came true. Jeremiah did just make a good guess, but if that's not enough proof, the prophet Isaiah even predicted the name of the king who would release the people to come back to Judah. In 740 BC, 150 years before this king was even born, Isaiah wrote in Isaiah chapter 44 and verse 28 that this king's name would be Cyrus. Now, did Cyrus's mom and dad read the book of Isaiah to decide what to name their baby boy? I don't think so. But even if they did, how could they have known that he would be the one to set the captives free? They couldn't have. Only God could have known all those things in advance. And he was the only one who could have revealed it to Jeremiah and Isaiah. And in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verses 20 through 23, it records the fulfillment of both of those predictions. Now, you might say, well, that proves the Old Testament was inspired by God, but what about the New Testament? Well, it predicts the future also. Jesus predicted that he would be betrayed by Judas, that he would be crucified, and that he would be raised from the dead after 3 days. And you might say, so what? He was God, so he had to have known that. But if nothing else, that proves that Jesus was and is God. But there are other predictions in the book of Revelation that still haven't happened yet. Things like the whole world being ruled by one government and the whole world using the same money. Now, they haven't happened yet, but it's not too hard to see how they could. But maybe the most convincing reason of all to believe the New Testament was inspired by God is the very men that God inspired to write it. Except for one person, and that's the Apostle John, all the writers of the New Testament were executed for what they wrote and what they believed. Now, if what they wrote was a lie and it wasn't inspired by God, they would have just admitted it to save their lives. But they were willing to die for what they wrote because they knew it was the truth and they knew that God had inspired them to write it. So that's the lesson for this week. It's a lot shorter when it's on camera. In class it took close to an hour. But next week we'll be looking at some more questions like, just who decided what would be in the Bible anyway? Do you know? Well, tune in next week and we'll find out together. Until then, God bless you each and every one for watching, and vaya con Dios.